It started on one of those nights that felt too quiet for the city. The streetlights outside my apartment hummed softly, throwing long amber streaks across the floor. I was halfway through reheating leftover pasta when I heard the knock. 3 soft taps, familiar, hesitant. Only one person knocked like that. Evan. My best friend since college. The kind of man who filled every room he entered without even trying. Confident, athletic, always laughing at something. Always surrounded by girls who swore he was just misunderstood. To me, he'd always been the guy who'd never taken anything seriously, except maybe basketball and his hair. I opened the door expecting the usual grin. Instead, he stood there with his hands jammed in his jacket pockets, shoulders tight, eyes flicking toward the hallway like he was hiding from someone. "Hey," I said, stepping aside. "You look like you just robbed a bank." He gave a hollow chuckle. "Can I come in?" Something about his voice, low, uncertain, made me nod without another word. He slipped inside and sat on the couch like it was his first time in my place, though he'd been here 100 times before. For a minute, neither of us spoke. Only the ticking of the wall clock and the distant whir of a neighbor's fan filled the silence. I dropped the plate of pasta on the counter and joined him. "So," I said, "what's the emergency? You look like someone told you you're getting drafted." He rubbed his palms together, still staring at the floor. "I've got a date tomorrow." I blinked. "Okay, that's normal. You've had, 50 of those?" He shook his head quickly. "No, this one's different. It's with a girl I actually like." That caught me off guard. Evan never used the word like. Usually, his stories ended with laughter and the phrase "it was just fun." "All right," I said slowly. "So what's the problem?" He exhaled, a sound caught somewhere between a sigh and a groan. "That's the thing. I don't know what I'm doing." I tried not to laugh. "Evan, you've been flirting since high school. You could charm a vending machine into giving you free chips." "Flirting's easy," he muttered. "It's the rest I'm worried about." Now I was intrigued. "The rest?" He looked up at me then, eyes wide, nervous. "I mean being with someone. Like, actually being close." My heart did a strange skip. I didn't know where this conversation was going, but it was heading somewhere unfamiliar. "Evan, you've been close with people before," I reminded him. "Not really," he said, shaking his head. "You know me. It was always quick. No meaning, no pressure. But this girl's different. I don't want to mess it up." He hesitated, then looked straight at me. "That's why I came here." "Okay," I said carefully. "To talk about it?" "Not just talk." He swallowed hard. "I need to practice." "Practice?" He nodded. "You know, intimacy." I stared at him, sure I'd misheard. "You want to practice intimacy?" He winced at his own words. "I know it sounds stupid, but you're the only person I trust enough. You'd tell me if I'm doing something wrong." For a second, I couldn't breathe. I actually looked around the room, half expecting hidden cameras. "You're joking?" I said, forcing a laugh. "Is this one of your pranks? Did Jordan put you up to this?" But he didn't laugh. He just looked at me, earnest, anxious, and so unlike himself it almost scared me. "I'm not joking," he said quietly. I don't want to screw up tomorrow. I figured if I could, try things with you, it would help." The words hung in the air like static that I felt my face heat up, my pulse quicken. My brain screamed no, but something deeper, something I didn't want to name, stirred beneath it. "Evan," I said slowly, "you do realize what you're asking me, right?" "I'm not asking for anything weird," he rushed out. "Just, I don't know, guidance. You're the most open-minded person I know. I thought you could help me relax." I laughed again, this time nervously. "Help you relax? What do you expect me to do? Light candles and take notes?" He gave a small, embarrassed smile. "Maybe just tell me what feels right, what girls like, what you like." That last word stuck to me like honey. "What you like." I rubbed the back of my neck, trying to steady my voice. "Evan, this is insane. You're straight. You're literally practicing for a date with a woman." "I know." He looked at me, desperate now. "That's why it's safe. It doesn't mean anything." but it already meant something. The way he said it, the way he looked at me, like he was balancing on a wire between curiosity and fear. That I stood up, needing distance. You should probably go home, man. Get some sleep before your big day. He didn't move. He just kept watching me. You're angry. I'm confused, I said, and maybe a little freaked out. He nodded slowly, then leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. I shouldn't have come. Forget I said anything. The regret in his voice hit me harder than I expected. I'd seen him angry, laughing, drunk, but never ashamed. Before I could think of what to say, he stood up to leave. Then he stopped halfway to the door and turned back. You've always been honest with me, he said, even when no one else was. That's why I asked you. I figured if I was going to trust anyone, it'd be you. The sincerity in his tone softened something inside me. I sighed. Evan, listen. It's not that I don't care. It's just, this could mess up everything between us. He stepped closer. It doesn't have to. Yeah, it does, I whispered, but my voice came out weaker than I meant. Another step. The distance between us shrank until I could smell the faint trace of his cologne. The one he always wore when he wanted to impress someone. He searched my face like he was waiting for permission he didn't know how to ask for. Evan? I started, but the word caught in my throat. He took a breath, eyes flicking from my mouth back to my eyes. His voice dropped to a near whisper. Just tell me what to do, he said. I trust you. The clock ticked once. A sharp, tiny sound in the thick silence. And in that suspended moment, I realized everything between us had already changed. For a long time after he said those words, I trust you, neither of us moved. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was pulsing, alive, filled with questions neither of us dared to ask. I finally stepped back, rubbing my temple. Evan, listen. This is crazy. You don't practice something like that. It's not an exam. He smiled nervously, running a hand through his hair. Then think of it as a study session. I rolled my eyes, trying to defuse the heat in the air. Study sessions usually don't involve body contact. Depends on the subject, he muttered under his breath. I caught it, pretended I didn't. My pulse was hammering in my ears, but I forced a steady tone. Okay, rule number 1. This doesn't mean anything. You said it yourself. It's not about feelings, it's about technique. Got it, he said quickly, nodding like a student taking notes. No feelings. Rule number 2, I continued, pacing slightly to keep my composure. We stop if it gets weird. He grinned. You mean weirder than this? Exactly. He laughed softly, and for a moment I almost forgot how bizarre this whole situation was. He had that kind of laugh, light, contagious, boyish. Rule number 3, I said, crossing my arms. You listen to me. No rushing, no hero moves. We do this my way or not at all. His eyes flicked up to mine. Yes, sir. The way he said it, teasing but low, made my stomach twist. I turned away, pretending to fix the blanket on the couch. All right, I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. Where do you even want to start? He shrugged, sitting down again. You tell me. You're the teacher. I tried not to laugh, but the sound came out anyway, half amusement, half disbelief. Fine, let's start simple. Eye contact. If you want someone to feel close to you, don't look away every time she looks at you. He nodded, then looked at me. Really looked. At first it was funny, exaggerated, deliberate, but after a few seconds the humor faded. His gaze softened, and I felt my throat tighten. Like that? He asked quietly. Yeah, I managed. That's good. Feels weird, he admitted. Like you can see everything I'm thinking. Maybe that's the point. We sat there, holding each other's gaze, the seconds stretching. The air between us grew heavier until I had to break it, glancing away. Okay, I said, forcing a laugh. You passed the staring test. Congratulations. He smiled, and it wasn't his usual confident grin. It was small, shy, grateful. What's next? Touch, I said before I could stop myself. Start small, like a hand on the arm. It's not about grabbing, it's about reassurance. Warmth. He hesitated, then slowly reached out. His fingers brushed my sleeve, tentative, unsure that I could have pulled away. I should have. But I didn't. That's fine, I said softly. He let out a shaky laugh. Fine? You sound like a driving instructor. Sorry. It's just. I caught his eyes again and felt my chest tighten. You're overthinking it. He smirked. Easy for you to say. Relax, I told him. It's just practice, remember? He nodded, but his hand didn't move away. The touch that was supposed to be brief lingered. A thumb brushing my sleeve, tracing invisible lines. I could feel the warmth seeping through the fabric, spreading like static under my skin. You know, he said quietly, you make this sound so simple, but you look nervous too. I'm not nervous. I lied. He smiled. You're tapping your fingers again. You always do that when you're trying to hide something. I froze, realizing he was right. He noticed things I didn't know anyone noticed. Okay, I said, stepping back, trying to breathe. That's enough touching. Lesson over. He tilted his head. You sure? I still feel like I'm failing the class. Evan, I mean it. His tone softened. I don't want to mess this up. With her, I mean, there was something raw in his voice now. A crack I'd never heard before. I sat back down beside him, calmer now. You won't, I said. You just need to stop trying to perform. You can't fake closeness. You either feel it or you don't. He nodded slowly. And if I don't? Then maybe she's not the right person. He looked down, thoughtful. How do you know when someone is? The question hung between us. I thought of all the years we'd known each other. The late-night talks, the games, the unspoken things I'd buried. You just know, I said finally. You stop thinking about what's supposed to happen, and it just happens. He looked at me again, his expression unreadable. Then, almost absent-mindedly, he said, Can we try something else? What? Like, if I wanted to kiss someone, what's the right way to do it? My heart skipped. That's not part of the syllabus. He laughed softly. Come on, I'm serious. You can't explain that in words. I hesitated, every nerve in my body on edge. It's about reading the moment. You look at them, and if they don't pull away, maybe you move closer. Slowly. He leaned in just a little, following my words. Like this. Closer? I whispered without meaning to. He obeyed. Now we were inches apart. I could feel his breath, warm and uneven. My mind screamed to stop this, but my body didn't move. Then what? He asked. You wait, I said, my voice barely a sound. You wait to see if they want it too. Our eyes met again. His hand was still resting on my arm, thumb drawing small circles that made it hard to think straight. Do they? He whispered. I swallowed hard. Sometimes they do. The space between us disappeared to a whisper. I could see the flutter in his throat, the tremor in his jaw. For one dizzy second, I thought it might actually happen. Then he blinked, exhaling sharply, pulling back just an inch. Sorry, that was close. Too close, I said quickly, my heart pounding. He laughed weakly. Guess I'm a fast learner. Guess you should take a break. He nodded, looking down at his hands. The air was thick with something we couldn't name. Thanks, he said quietly, for not freaking out. Yeah, I murmured. No big deal. But it was a big deal. I could still feel the heat of his touch, still hear the tremor in his voice when he said sorry as he leaned back against the couch. Closing his eyes, I realized that I'd crossed my own invisible line, and the worst part was, I wasn't sure I wanted to go back. The next evening arrived like a storm I could feel long before it broke. I kept telling myself it was just another night, that Evan would laugh off the whole thing and move on. But around 9, the soft knock came again. The same rhythm, the same hesitation. When I opened the door, he was standing there in a gray hoodie, hands in pockets, eyes uncertain. Hey, he said, almost sheepish. Can I come in? I hesitated just long enough for him to notice, then stepped aside. You always ask like I might say no. Tonight you might. He replied with a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. He sat on the couch, and I could feel the weight of what was unspoken settle between us. The TV was off, the lights dim. It made the air seem heavier somehow. After a long silence, he said, "I've been thinking about what we did last night." "That's never a good sentence," I said lightly, trying to joke that he gave a quick grin, then looked down. "I don't want to go to that date tomorrow feeling like I don't know what I'm doing. I thought maybe we could, you know." He paused, searching for the right words. "Do it properly." I blinked. "Do what properly?" He met my eyes steady this time. "The practice." I laughed. Too loud, too forced. "Evan, this isn't football practice. You don't get better at dating by rehearsing it on your best friend." He didn't flinch. "You said it yourself, right? Connection matters. I want to know how it's supposed to feel." The way he said it, soft, genuine, made my chest tighten. "You're asking for trouble," I warned. "Maybe," he said, "but I'd rather screw up with you than with someone who doesn't understand me." That did it. My defenses crumbled. I sighed, rubbing the bridge of my nose. "Fine, but this is strictly academic. Purely educational." He grinned. "Yes, Professor. Don't push it." He laughed, and for a second the tension lifted. But as we moved closer on the couch, the space between jokes and silence started to dissolve. I told him to relax, to stop thinking about what he was supposed to do and just focus on being present. "You can't fake sincerity," I said. "People feel it when you mean something." He nodded, watching me closely, like every word mattered. "Show me." He whispered that it wasn't a command. It was a plea, so I did. Gently, carefully, I guided his hand, showed him how touch could be more about reassurance than impulse. How slowing down made small things matter. The rhythm of breath, the weight of stillness, the space between words. "This isn't about moves," I said quietly. "It's about listening. Not with your ears, but everything else." He tried to follow, awkward at first. His movements hesitant, unsure, as if afraid of doing something wrong. But there was sincerity in it, a kind of clumsy tenderness that disarmed me completely. "Better?" he asked after a moment. "Better?" I whispered. He smiled, relief flickering across his face. The dim light caught the edges of his jaw, the small tremor in his breath. "Why are you being so careful?" he asked suddenly. "Because you're nervous." "I'm nervous because you're being careful," he said, his voice softer now, almost teasing. We both laughed quietly, but the laughter didn't last. It faded into a silence that wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was something else. He leaned back against the couch, exhaling slowly. "You ever notice how quiet it gets in this place?" "Yeah," I said. "Sometimes it feels like the walls are listening." He smiled faintly, eyes half closed. "Maybe they are." Another pause. Then he said, "You make this feel easy." I looked at him. "That's because it's not supposed to be difficult." "No," he said, shaking his head. "I mean, being close to someone. I've never felt like this with anyone before. Like I don't have to act." That struck me harder than I expected. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. He turned his head toward me, eyes searching mine. "You're thinking too much again. Old habit." "Then stop." He reached for my hand, tentative, uncertain, and just held it. No pretense, no words. Just the warmth of skin against skin. The pulse between us steady and alive. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. "This is what it's supposed to feel like," I said softly. "When it's real." He nodded, eyes glimmering in the low light. "I like it better than I thought I would." The simplicity of that statement made something inside me unravel. We stayed like that, close but still, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound between us. The air smelled faintly of coffee and detergent, and for a strange, fleeting moment, it felt like the world had narrowed to the small space between our joined hands. At some point, he shifted, resting his head against my shoulder. I froze. "Sorry," he murmured. "I'm just tired." "It's fine," I said. Though my heartbeat said otherwise, he didn't move again. His breathing slowed, evened out. I felt the rise and fall of his chest against me, steady and warm. "You okay?" I whispered after a while. He mumbled something. half asleep. No girls ever made me feel this safe. The words slipped out of him like a dream, unguarded and true. I stayed still, afraid that moving might break the fragile spell that had settled around us. The weight of his head, the warmth of his body, the quiet trust in that moment. It was all too much and not enough at the same time. Minutes passed, maybe hours. I lost track. I just sat there, listening to him breathe, my own thoughts tangled somewhere between guilt and something dangerously close to hope that I knew this wasn't supposed to happen. I knew what lines we'd crossed, and that pretending they didn't exist wouldn't make them disappear. But none of that mattered right then. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about what I should feel. I was just feeling it. When I finally looked down at him, asleep against my shoulder, I realized that something irreversible had shifted. He wasn't my straight friend anymore. Not to me. Not after tonight that I stayed awake long after he drifted off, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding so loud I was sure he'd hear it if he woke. And though I tried to tell myself it was still just practice, deep down I knew. Nothing about this was pretend anymore. Morning came too soon that I woke to soft light spilling through the blinds, painting lines across the couch and the two of us still on it. Evan's head was resting against my shoulder, his arms slung lazily across my waist like he'd always belonged there. For one beautiful, disorienting moment, it felt right. Then reality crashed back in. He stirred, blinking as he realized where he was. I saw it happen, the flicker of recognition, the subtle tensing of his shoulders. He sat up quickly, rubbing the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. "Hey," I said, voice rough from sleep. "Morning," he muttered. "Sorry, I fell asleep here." "Yeah," I said softly. I noticed. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. All the warmth from last night seemed to evaporate under the gray morning light. He stood, stretching awkwardly. "I should probably get going. My date's at noon." Of course. The date. The one he'd wanted to practice for. "Right?" I said, forcing a smile that didn't feel real. "Wouldn't want to be late for that." He looked at me, uncertain. "We're good, right?" The question hung there, fragile and strange. "Yeah," I lied. "We're good." He nodded, but his eyes searched my face for something. Maybe reassurance, maybe forgiveness. When he didn't find it, he gave a quick smile and grabbed his jacket. Before he stepped out, he said quietly, "Thanks for everything." And then he was gone. The door clicked shut, leaving a silence that felt heavier than before. I sank back onto the couch, the same spot where he'd fallen asleep, still faintly warm. My chest ached in a way I couldn't name. I told myself it was fine, that this was what I'd agreed to, just practice, nothing more. But the words felt hollow. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still feel the weight of his head on my shoulder, the slow rhythm of his breathing, the quiet murmur of "no girls ever made me feel this safe." That wasn't nothing. Hours passed like fog. I tried reading, cleaning, even watching TV, but everything blurred together. Every thought led back to him, his nervous smile, the way he'd looked at me before falling asleep. Was he thinking about it too? Or was it already forgotten? Just a strange experiment he'd never mention again. By the time evening rolled in, I was exhausted from my own overthinking. The sky outside had turned pale violet, the city humming quietly below. I told myself to stop waiting for him to text, stop imagining footsteps in the hallway. But then, a knock. 3 soft taps. I froze. For a second, I thought I was imagining it. But when I opened the door, he was there. Same gray hoodie, same hesitant eyes. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "You forget something?" He shook his head. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside again, heart pounding. He didn't sit this time. He stood by the window, staring out at the fading light. "Date went fine," he said eventually. "That's good." "Yeah, she's nice. Funny, too. We had dinner, talked about movies, work, the usual stuff." "That's great, Evan," I said, forcing the words through a tight throat. He nodded, still looking out the window. But something felt off. I frowned. Off how? He turned then, and his eyes, tired, conflicted, met mine. "I don't know. I was there, but my head wasn't." What do you mean? He took a deep breath. Every time she laughed, I kept hearing your voice instead. The room seemed to shrink around me. I tried to focus, he continued quietly. I really did. But then she leaned closer, and all I could think about was… He trailed off, looking down at his hands. Your hand on mine. The way you made everything feel calm. I swallowed hard, not trusting my voice. He looked up again, eyes searching. I don't get it. I've known you for years, and I never thought of you that way. But now it's all I can think about. Evan, I started, but he cut me off. I'm not saying I'm different now, he said quickly. He sighed. When I was with her, everything felt forced. But when I'm here, it feels right. The words hit deeper than I wanted them to. I tried to look away, but he stepped closer. Do you think that's weird? I think it's confusing, I said carefully. Yeah, he said, running a hand through his hair. Tell me about it. We stood there, the distance between us small enough to feel his unease. He smelled faintly of rain and cologne, the same scent that had lingered on my pillow that morning. Evan, I said quietly, you don't have to figure everything out right now. Maybe it was just the moment. What happened last night doesn't have to mean anything. He gave a small, almost sad smile. That's the thing. It did mean something. I exhaled slowly. You're scared. Yeah, he admitted, because I've never felt like this before. I spent the whole day trying to convince myself it was just confusion. But, he shrugged helplessly. I kept thinking about you. Your voice, your laugh, the way you looked at me when you said I was nervous. It wouldn't go away. The sincerity in his tone made my chest tighten. Evan, I don't want to be the reason you question yourself. Maybe I need to question myself, he said. Maybe that's how I find out what I really want. He took another step toward me, close enough now that I could see the faint exhaustion in his eyes. And right now, I don't think I want to see her again. The words hung between us, quiet and electric. That he didn't move closer, didn't touch me. But he didn't have to. The meaning was already there, heavy and undeniable. I looked at him, searching for the right response. Something safe, something rational. But all I found was the same pulse of warmth that had started the night before. Okay? I whispered finally. Okay? Yeah, I said, my voice trembling despite myself. Maybe we both stop pretending we don't know what this is. He gave a small nod, relief flickering in his eyes. Then he exhaled, slow and shaky, as if setting down a weight he'd been carrying all day. For a while, we didn't speak. We just stood there, two people caught between what was safe and what was real. When he finally turned toward the couch, the same one where everything had changed, I realized there was no going back to who we were before. And deep down, I wasn't sure I wanted to. The days that followed felt like someone had turned the volume down on life. No more late-night knocks. No text that made my phone light up at 2 a.m. Just silence. The kind that doesn't rest on the air but sinks into it.at first. I told myself it was fine. People need space. Maybe he was sorting out what he felt, or maybe he'd realized what a mistake it all was. Either way, I played my part. I worked longer hours, answered friends' messages I'd ignored for weeks, even forced myself to laugh at things that weren't funny. But underneath it all was a steady ache, like a note stuck in my chest that refused to fade. He still texted sometimes. A hey here, a busy there. Harmless, meaningless words that somehow carried too much weight. I'd stare at them longer than I should, debating whether to answer, finally typing back something neutral. Then the conversation would fizzle and we'd drift apart again. Occasionally, we'd bump into each other around the neighborhood, at the cafe we both liked, at the corner store, even once at the park. Each time it felt like running into a version of him I didn't know how to talk to anymore. Hey, he'd say, like we were just friends again. Hey, I'd reply, pretending that one word didn't feel like holding my breath underwater. He always smiled, but it was never the same. There was distance in it now, a quiet caution, as if he was afraid that one wrong word would pull us back into that night neither of us knew how to name. That I thought if I waited long enough, the feeling would fade. That eventually, he'd forget, and so would I. But love, or whatever this was, doesn't fade just because it's inconvenient. A week passed. Then another point one evening. I came home to find a small note slipped under my door, his handwriting unmistakable. "Can we talk tonight? Please." I stared at it for a long moment, torn between hope and dread. When I opened the door later that night, he was standing in the hallway, hands in his jacket pockets, looking exhausted. The quiet hum of the corridor lights filled the space between us. "You could have just texted," I said. "I wasn't sure you'd answer." "Fair point." I stepped aside. "Come in." He walked past me, stopped halfway into the room, then turned like he wasn't sure why he'd come at all. "Something wrong?" I asked. He hesitated. "I don't know. Everything feels wrong." "Because of me?" He looked up, eyes flicking to mine. "No, because of me." I folded my arms, forcing calm. "Evan, you don't have to do this. Whatever you're feeling, it's okay. You're straight. You got caught in something confusing, and that's normal. It happens." He flinched like I'd slapped him. "Don't say that. It's true, isn't it? You're trying to talk yourself out of what happened. And I get it. But you don't have to keep torturing yourself." "I'm not torturing myself," he said, voice rising. "I'm trying to understand it." I sighed. "There's nothing to understand. You're straight, I'm not. You got close to me because you trusted me. That's all." He shook his head, frustrated. "Stop saying that word like it's a shield. Straight. It doesn't even mean anything right now." I froze. He took a shaky breath and kept going. "I've been avoiding you because every time I see you, I feel like I'm losing control. I can't label it. I don't know what it is. But I know what it isn't. It isn't a mistake." The words hit hard. "Then what was it?" I asked quietly. He stepped closer. "It wasn't practice." My heart stuttered. He swallowed. "That night, I said I wanted to prepare for my date. But I just wanted a reason to be close to you. I didn't know how to say it without sounding insane, so I made it sound like something casual. Evan, I didn't come to you because I was scared of that girl," he said, his voice cracking. "I came because I couldn't stop thinking about you. The way you listen, the way you make everything quiet when I'm around you. I didn't know what that meant, and I still don't. But pretending it meant nothing? That's what's been killing me." I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I felt my chest ache. He took another step closer. "I tried going back to normal. I tried ignoring it. But when I'm near you, I feel something that doesn't need a label. I just feel peace." For a moment, all I could do was stare at him. The same man who'd once joked about needing practice, now standing in front of me with his heart wide open. "I don't know what to do with this," I admitted. "You're saying everything I wanted to hear, but I don't even know if you mean it the way I do." He exhaled, eyes wet but steady. "Maybe I don't have the right words yet, but I know what's real. And that night, when you held me, it was the first time in a long time I didn't feel like I had to pretend to be someone else." The room went still. The hum of the city outside, the faint ticking of the clock. Everything faded until it was just us. I took a step closer. "Then stop running from it." He laughed softly through his tears. "I'm trying. Try harder," I said. My voice gentler now. He nodded, then reached out, hesitating just before his hand found mine. His fingers were cold, trembling, but when they closed around mine, the world seemed to quiet again. That same strange calm we'd both felt once before. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. His thumb brushed over my knuckles. Slow, tentative, almost reverent. "This feels right," he whispered. "Yeah," I said. "It does." For the first time in weeks, the silence between us wasn't heavy. It wasn't avoidance or confusion. It was understanding. Fragile, unspoken, real. We stood like that for a long while, hand in hand, the distance finally gone. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring or how we'd explain this to anyone else. But for that moment, none of it mattered. Because for the first time since this began, we weren't pretending anymore. And in that stillness, I knew whatever this was, it was ours. Time has a strange way of softening things. A few months ago, every breath between us had been charged with doubt. Now it just feels like breathing. Evan and I never made a big announcement. There was no grand confession. No dramatic kiss under the rain like in some movie. It just happened. One evening he stayed for dinner. Then he stayed the night. Then one night became two, and somewhere in between, my apartment started to look different. Less mine, more ours. His jacket on the back of my chair, his toothbrush next to mine, his favorite coffee mug sitting stubbornly by the sink. It wasn't about claiming space. It was about belonging. He never called it a relationship at first. Neither did I. We were just us, comfortable, confusing, constant. We cooked, watched bad TV, argued about nothing. Sometimes he'd fall asleep with his hand still resting on mine, like he needed the reminder that I was real, and every morning, I'd wake before him, watching the quiet rise and fall of his chest, wondering how something that began as an accident could feel so inevitable now. There was a day, not long after he moved some of his things in, when I noticed something different in him. He'd stopped talking about that girl altogether. He'd also stopped saying, "I'm not like you." That phrase that used to hang like a wall between us. Now, when we were together, he just existed, open, unguarded. Sometimes he'd look at me across the room and shake his head, smiling like he still couldn't believe this was his life. One morning, while we were making breakfast, he caught me staring. "What?" he asked, flipping a pancake, pretending not to notice the blush creeping up my neck. I shrugged. "You just look different. Different good or different weird? Different like you're not fighting yourself anymore." He laughed. "That's because I surrendered." "To what?" He looked at me then, eyes steady. "To you." I froze, spatula halfway to the counter. "You're going to burn that." He smiled, flipping the pancake with ridiculous precision. "Worth it." It was moments like that, small, ordinary, almost careless, that built whatever this thing between us had become. Not a label, not a performance, just the quiet certainty of being where we were meant to be. He still liked to tease me about how it all began. One night, after a long day, we were lying on the couch, the TV humming softly in the background. He turned to me, grinning. "So," he said, stretching lazily, "how's your teaching career going?" I frowned. "What teaching career?" "You know," he said with mock seriousness, "the one where you give private lessons on intimacy." I groaned. "Please don't start." He chuckled, leaning closer. "I'm just saying, you turned your student into a straight A case." "Straight A, huh? You still clinging to that first word?" He paused, smirking. "Not anymore." There it was, the quiet truth tucked inside the joke. Then, with that familiar mischievous glint in his eye, he added, "You never asked how my practice went." I raised an eyebrow. "Fine. How's your practice going?" He smiled, soft and certain. "Perfect. Because I found who I was practicing for." I didn't answer right away. My throat closed up, the kind of feeling that's too full to be put into words. So I just leaned in, resting my forehead against his. The warmth of his skin said everything language couldn't. Our lives fell into rhythm after that. It wasn't some storybook version of love, no fireworks, no sweeping music. But there was peace in the small things. Mornings when he brewed coffee before I even got out of bed. Afternoons when we worked in silence, his foot brushing mine under the table. Nights when the world outside didn't exist, only laughter, soft voices, and the heartbeat I could feel through his chest when I leaned against him. He still had moments of doubt, sometimes asking, "Does it ever feel strange to you?" And I'd say, "Only when you overthink it." He'd smile, like he was finally learning to stop. The truth is, I never expected this. I'd spent so long building walls to keep myself safe that when someone finally climbed over them, I didn't know what to do. But Evan didn't knock them down. He just sat on the other side, waiting, until I was ready to open the gate myself. He taught me that love doesn't have to announce itself. It can whisper. It can grow quietly in the space between shared meals, tired laughter, and soft apologies. It doesn't need the right label to be real. And maybe that's what made it feel so honest. One night, much later, we ended up on the balcony, watching the city lights blink like restless stars. The air was cool. His arm was warm around my shoulders. He looked thoughtful, the way he always did before saying something important. "You know," he murmured, "I used to think love had a type, a shape, a plan. Someone told me once that you can't choose who makes you feel safe. You just recognize it when it happens." I smiled. Sounds like something you'd say now. He chuckled softly. Maybe you're rubbing off on me. Maybe, I said. He turned, pressing a gentle kiss to my temple. I used to tell people I was straight, he whispered. Now I just tell them I'm yours. It wasn't dramatic, but the simplicity of it hit harder than any confession could. I felt it settle somewhere deep, grounding and pure. I looked up at him, the city reflecting in his eyes. Guess you never needed practice after all. He tilted his head, smiling. Why's that? Because, I said, tracing a small circle on his hand, you just needed me. He didn't answer with words. He just leaned in, and the space between us disappeared. The city went on humming below, but up there, in that quiet slice of sky, everything felt still. It wasn't a perfect ending, real love never is. But it was ours, warm, steady, unspoken, and true. And for the first time in both our lives, we didn't need to define it to know exactly what it was.